This hearing will now come to order. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's hearing. Continuing independent assessment of the National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System, NPOESS. Today, this subcommittee will receive two reports on the perennially unsettled NPOESS, the National Polar Orbiting Operational Environmental Satellite System. The Science Committee, under the chairmanship of former Chairman Bollert and our current Chairman Gordon, have devoted years of oversight to this program. And despite our relentless pressure, our relentless oversight to get this program under control, we meet again to learn what's gone wrong, that the NPOESS satellites are facing another delay, another schedule slip, and that the total cost expected has grown an additional $1 billion. The committee's first hearing on the subject was in 2003, my first year in Congress. At that time, the first NPOESS satellite was projected for launch in 2009, this year. Here we are. 6 years of effort have gained us 1 year of expected progress. Now we think that the first NPOESS satellite is likely to fly in 2014. But if the math is correct and we continue to advance at the rate that we're advancing, the satellite will not really be ready for launch until 2039. That is obviously not acceptable. The delays and cost overruns we will hear about today are not the most important news from the hearing. The most important news is what steps need to be taken to reorganize the management of this program in order to achieve a successful launch by 2014. We probably can't manage one this year at this point. To help us understand what still needs to be done, two independent groups have given us the result of their recent works. The Government Accountability Office, GAO, their team, represented by Mr. David Powner, has given the committee invaluable help overseeing NOAA's satellite programs. We're also fortunate today to welcome Mr. Tom Young, who has found it hard to enjoy his retirement with all of the investigations of government space programs that we have asked him to lead in recent years. He will present the findings of an independent review team that has just completed its review of the NPOESS program management. Both Mr. Powner and Mr. Young have recommendations for Congress and the administration regarding how to restructure the management of this program to get it back on track. And our third witness is NOAA Deputy Undersecretary Mary Glackin, who has recently taken on this thankless, difficult task of trying to shepherd NPOESS to a successful conclusion, by which I assume we mean actually launching one. Serving in her position since December of 2007 means that she should have some historical perspective on all the questions facing NOAA and the administration. Fundamentally, we hope she will shed light on why the last director of OSTP failed to make decisions on this project that are now left to the new administration. I think that Mr. Young, Mr. Powner, and Ms. Glackin will all agree that NPOESS now needs key guidance that only the White House can deliver. As a project shared among three agencies, the Department of Defense, NASA, and NOAA, NPOESS is cursed by too many cooks and no agreed-upon recipe for the proper mission for the program. Only the White House can settle those differences and decide a path forward. The subcommittee asked OSTP to send a representative today, but unfortunately a national security exercise has kept all senior OSTP staff occupied today. So instead of being here at the Rayburn building, they are presumably in an undisclosed secure location. When it comes to NPOESS, it has been years since we had the luxury of time for making decisions. NOAA recently made its last polar satellite operational. It predicted a lifetime is 5 years. With every passing month, GAO reminds us that we get closer to the probability of a data interruption in weather data, as well as a certain interruption in climate data. NOAA primarily pins its hopes to avoiding such a data gap by using the NPP satellite, which was never intended as an operational satellite, as a gap filler. I would feel much more confident with that plan if the NPP launch schedule was not also slipping, and if we actually knew whether its main instrument was going to work. On March 12, speaking to state officials about the Recovery Act, President Obama said, "If we see money being misspent, we're going to put a stop to it." We have seen money misspent on NPOESS, but stopping NPOESS is not an option. NPOESS may be a mess, no real maybe about it, and it may have been mismanaged, not much maybe about that either, but the American public needs the data produced by NPOESS in order to have accurate weather forecast, and the world needs the climate data that would be collected by NPOESS to continue to understand how our climate is changing. Cancellation of NPOESS is not an option, and failure is unacceptable. If we do not have NPOESS, we will need something like it, and we will need it soon. We will spend our time today trying to deal with the program as it is, determine where we need to go, and decide how we will get there from here. I want to thank the witnesses for appearing today, and now recognize my colleague from Georgia, the ranking member, Dr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome our witnesses here today and thank them for participating in this important hearing. This is the committee's 6th hearing on the NPOESS program, scanning both Democratic as well as Republican controls of the committee. This is, however, the first time that this committee, the Investigations Oversight Subcommittee, has held a hearing, but we have been actively involved for some time now. NPOESS was originally planned to create synergies and cost savings by combining the DMSP within the Department of Defense and the POESS system at NOAA. But instead, the program has doubled in cost, shrunk from 6 to 4 satellites, degraded its sensor capabilities, and seen its schedule slip 6 years. If that wasn't bad enough, Mr. Young points out in his testimony that, I quote him, "The current program has an extraordinarily low probability of success," unquote, even after numerous rebaselining and a significant McCurdy recertification. So how did we get here? After several years of cooperation, it has become clear that the partner agencies have differing priorities and levels of commitment. This has certainly expected their unique missions, but this divergence has ultimately created an untenable partnership. NOAA is pressured by the scientific community to continue operation of research satellites that feed cutting-edge data into weather and climate models, while DoD is content to operate legacy hardware. NOAA doesn't have any extra POESS satellites to buff its transition, while DoD still has 2 DMSP satellites on the ground. This is NOAA's flagship mission, yet this barely amounts to a rounding error in the Pentagon's budget. Another reason is simply that space acquisition isn't easy. This isn't an excuse, but it's worth noting that we aren't asking these agencies to build cardboard boxes. Sure, the government could do better with cost estimating, with procurement and contract management. But in the end, we are building one-of-a-kind innovative hardware and launching it 17,500 miles per hour into the vacuum of space. Because of this complexity, we have sought to limit our costs by putting numerous sensors on fewer spacecraft and launch vehicles, thereby restricting the opportunities for performance upgrades to generational timeframes. In doing so, we have created a program that is essentially too big to fail, a phrase we have all heard lately to describe another huge fiasco. By placing all of our eggs in one basket, we have developed an architecture where it seems failure is not an option. Further compounding the problem are issues of requirement creeps from climate sensors, schedule pressure because of data continuity concerns, and cost caps from external factors like Nunn-McCurdy. It really isn't surprising that the program isn't run well when the managers can't fine-tune fundamental program management parameters like cost, schedule, and performance. So where do we go from here? The GAO and the independent review team have offered recommendations, and NOAA has proposed future management, budget, and data options. The IRT states that this program will ultimately require the White House to weigh in. We certainly have near-term decisions on the horizon, as well as long-term plans to consider. I look forward to exploring the implications of these options and proposed directions with the chairman. NPOESS is a critical national asset that deserves not only this committee's attention, but also that of all partner agencies, the White House, and the appropriators. Every American is impacted by this program, whether they know it or not. It is our responsibility to ensure that the farmers, fishermen, our soldiers and sailors, Marines, and everyday commuters continue to receive weather and climate information. But we must not forget to be good stewards of taxpayers' money and to root out waste, inefficiency, and duplication wherever we can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. I now ask unanimous consent that all additional opening statements submitted by members be included in the record. And without objection, is so ordered. It is now my pleasure to introduce our witnesses at this time. Dr. David Powner is the Director of Information Technology Management Issues at the Government Accountability Office. Mr. Tom Young is the Chair of the NPOESS Independent Review Team, and Ms. Mary Glackin is the Deputy Undersecretary for Oceans and Atmosphere at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. As our witnesses should know, you each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included in the record for the hearing. When you have completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel. It is practice of the subcommittee to receive testimony under oath. Do any of you have any objection to taking an oath? All the witnesses indicated that they did not. You also have the right to be represented by counsel. Do any of you have counsel here? All the witnesses indicated that they did not. If you now please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth? I do. Okay. All the witnesses responded in the affirmative. So the witnesses have now taken the oath. We will begin with Mr. David Powner. Mr. Powner, please begin.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, and members of the subcommittee, we appreciate the opportunity to testify on our latest NPOESS report being released today. This afternoon, I will discuss NPOESS's continued problems and our recommendations for improvement, both near and long term, so that our nation will have continued data and imagery essential for weather forecasting and climate monitoring. 6 years ago, I first testified on NPOESS before Chairman Ehler's subcommittee when NPOESS was a $7 billion program and the launch of its first satellite was April 2009. Today, the cost has increased $8 billion to at least $15 billion, and the first satellite launch has been delayed 5 years to March 2014. I will briefly discuss these increasing costs, schedule delays, as well as potential gaps in critical satellite coverage and ineffective executive management. The current cost of $14 billion in the various planned launch schedules are not achievable. Technical problems with 2 critical sensors, VIIRS and CRIS, continue to drive up costs and push launch schedules out. We expect the current $14 billion estimate to increase at least $1 billion to cover sensor technical issues, new security requirements, and additional operations and maintenance costs. We also need to keep in mind that the integration and testing of the sensors for the initial satellites has not yet occurred, and this could be an additional cost driver. The new cost estimates are scheduled to go to the XCOM for approval by the end of the month, and we understand that at least 5 estimates are being considered. Schedules for the demonstration satellite, known as MPP, and the first 2 satellites have been delayed 7, 14, and 5 months respectively. These delays endanger the continuity of weather and climate data. With the current launch schedule, should we run into any problems with the satellite launch failure or operational problems, we will have gaps in satellite coverage. My written testimony highlights these potential gaps in each of the 3 orbits. In fact, a single launch failure of one of the remaining DoD satellites, known as DMSP or of NPP, could result in a gap in satellite coverage of up to 5 years. NOAA has been plagued by ineffective management over the years, and today our report highlights the NPOESS Executive Committee has not been effective in fulfilling its responsibilities, which has contributed to NPOESS problems. Specifically, the right folks don't attend the XCOM meetings, those that do don't effectively manage risks, nor do they make tough decisions when needed. For example, DoD's Undersecretary for Acquisition is DoD's official XCOM member, as agreed to in official memorandums of agreement. This official, who is DoD's acquisition authority, has never attended an XCOM meeting and has delegated this role to the Undersecretary of the Air Force. Not having the acquisition authority attend these meetings has resulted in delays, as the XCOM decisions have later been overturned by the acquisition authority. The bottom line here is that having the right officials attend could greatly streamline decision-making. In addition, although the XCOM holds quarterly meetings, they do not routinely track action items and issues to closure. Also, the tri-agency structure creates a situation of differing and competing priorities, and the XCOM has not been effective in resolving these differences. In fact, the XCOM is about to be presented with differing cost estimates by the end of the month, where they will be asked to make a tough decision on the right program cost and scope, especially given the fact that NOAA and DoD will likely have differing costs and program performance that are acceptable. Before discussing our recommendation, I'd like to note a few areas of progress. The NPOESS program has delivered and integrated 3 of the 5 instruments for NPP. The ground station systems have been installed and tested at both locations, and the command and control system has passed acceptance testing. However, moving forward, we recommend that in the near term, the NPOESS program needs to have the right XCOM members attend and participate in the XCOM meetings, and this includes DoD's Undersecretary for Acquisition. Also, the XCOM needs to effectively manage risks and make decisions, starting with approving new program costs and schedule baselines. The program also needs to develop mitigation plans to address potential gaps in satellite coverage, and it needs to seek White House guidance on a direction forward. These near-term recommendations are essential to keep the acquisition moving forward, to mitigate future cost increases, schedule delays, and gaps in satellite coverage. Looking at this from a longer-term perspective, we need to acknowledge this tri-agency experiment has been an epic failure, and we need an exit strategy to go back to separate satellite acquisitions for the next series of polar orbiting satellites. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my statement. Thank you for your leadership and oversight of this acquisition.
Thank you, Mr. Powner. Mr. Young.
Chairman Miller, Ranking Member Brown, members of the subcommittee, I am pleased to present a summary of the NPOESS Independent Review Team report. We identified 10 findings and recommended corrective actions. Finding 1, the current NPOESS program has an extraordinarily low probability of success, and implementation of the following recommendations that I'll discuss are necessary to address this finding. 2, continuity of data, which each user organization identifies as #1 priority, is at significant risk. The program is hardware poor, with little protection against a launch failure or early spacecraft failure. Data outages in a particular orbit can be measured in years with a failure. Corrective action is limited to moving the 3rd and 4th spacecraft closer to the 1st and 2nd spacecraft in their development schedules, launching on need rather than schedule, and exploiting NPP data. 3, NPOESS is being managed with cost as the most important parameter and not mission success. This program cost-focused culture needs to change to a mission success-focused culture, and the NPOESS contract award fee criteria needs a similar change in focus. 4, NPOESS XCOM is ineffective. Members must have decision authority. The focus of the XCOM should be top-level issues and timely decisions. 5, NPOESS program is not part of a space acquisition organization. which makes program implementation extremely difficult. NPOESS must be assigned to a space acquisition organization such as Space and Missile Systems Center or NASA. 6, fiscal year funding shortfalls are causing decisions to be made that are adding risk and increasing cost. Funding shortfalls must be corrected. 7, the highest probability of success is to maintain the current contractor team, Northrop Grumman and Raytheon, and the IRT recommends this action. 8, due to potential for coverage gaps, NTT has become a critical asset, and it is recommended that this be recognized and incorporated in program planning. 9, priorities of NOAA and DoD/Air Force are not aligned. DoD/Air Force stated that legacy performance is acceptable and that they're unwilling to provide additional funding to achieve above legacy capability. NOAA stated that current weather forecasting utilizes legacy and NASA R&D satellite data. Accepting legacy capabilities would be a significant step back. This difference in priorities must be resolved. 10, the current budget is inadequate with a shortfall in excess of $1 billion. Funding the program by fiscal year and through completion to 80% confidence, including a management reserve of approximately 25%, is required to have an executable program budgeted at the most likely cost. The IRT recognizes that NPOESS is a national program with quality of life, economic, disaster planning, and national security implications. While the IRT believes the cited recommendations must be implemented, additional actions are necessary to have a successful NPOESS program. The critical issue is the lack of alignment of DoD/Air Force and NOAA priorities. The IRT believes that the XCOM will be unable to resolve this difference, and the White House will be required to define the NPOESS program that is in the national interest. Following the NPOESS program decision, the responsibility for program implementation must be assigned to one organization. Air Force with SMC having implementation responsibility, or NOAA with NASA having implementation responsibility. Either can do the job. The IRT believes that the managing organization must have total acquisition responsibility, be allocated all currently planned in program budget, and be responsible for funding the defined program at an 80% confidence level. The IRT recommends that responsibility for NPOESS be assigned to NOAA, with NASA acting as NOAA's acquisition organization. This recommendation is based upon the recognition that NOAA has a broader responsibility for weather and climate requirements than any other organization and is a natural advocate for this program. Under this construct, NOAA NASA will provide NPOESS data to the DoD and Air Force and establish a process to meet future DoD and Air Force needs. The XCOM concept should continue to assure effective program implementation. Implementation of the IRT recommendations and additional actions is urgently required. Risk and unnecessary costs are being realized at an unacceptable rate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Ms. Glackin.
Chairman Miller, Dr. Brown, and distinguished members and staff of the committee, I appreciate the opportunity to testify about the steps NOAA has taken over the past year to address the ongoing challenges of this critical program. While I'm a 30-year career employee of NOAA, I've only served in my current position for the past 18 months. During this short tenure, I've spent a significant portion of my time learning about and overseeing the complex management of NOAA's satellite programs, especially NPOESS. The challenges the program faces are substantial, and I'm working closely with both Secretary Locke and NOAA Administrator Lubchenco to address the recommendations presented by both GAO and the independent review team. Since NOAA's final satellite in its current series was launched earlier this spring, the agency is particularly focused on the threat further delays in this program may have on crucial weather and climate forecasts NOAA provides to the nation. NOAA is working with its partners, DoD and NASA, to move quickly to resolve remaining program issues and given their possible consequences. I'd like to highlight 2 actions we've taken over the past year to on the program and then address the recommendations that we've just heard from the my 2 colleagues here. One step that NOAA has taken is that we've advocated with our tri-agency partners last summer to install a government program manager at the subcontractor facility where the main imaging sensor, known as VIIRS, is being developed. By installing a government official in plant, an action typically taken by NASA for complex developments, it's enabled the program to better address the ongoing technical problems. The benefits are not only providing significant oversight of day-to-day testing and quality assurance processes, but allows the government to anticipate and react quickly to problems. The second step, as highlighted by this hearing, is the tri-agency leadership of the XCOM called for the high-level independent review that Mr. Young just provided this committee. When the IRT findings were initially reported to the XCOM, they made it very clear that the NPOESS program has little chance of success as it is currently structured. NOAA is taking the team's grim assessment of the program very seriously and is working with DoD and NASA to respond to the recommendations. Notably, we're actively working with the leadership of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy to resolve the differences that exist among the agencies and implement actions to respond to the recommendations. We're approaching the responses to the finding and recommendations through 3 major areas which I'll address: management of the program, satellite coverage, and budgeting of the program. For management, NOAA, DoD, and NASA have been developing and considering 4 possible options. Option 1 is to maintain the existing tri-agency partnership with management improvements and additional budget reserve. Under this option, the tri-agency structure would remain in place, but the budget and schedule would be adjusted to allow the program to continue to address continued technical challenges. Option 2 would establish NOAA as the national lead for delivering weather and climate data. Under this option, NOAA, with NASA as its acquisition agent, would have responsibility for delivering a system that provides weather and climate data required. DoD would continue to provide funds, and all agencies would still coordinate on the data needs for their user communities. The NPOESS program office would be transferred to NASA's Goddard Space Flight Facility Center in Maryland. Option 3 would be similar, but with DoD as the national lead for delivering this. Under this option, the NPOESS program office would be transferred to the Air Force Space and Missile Center in Los Angeles. Option 4 would result in a divergence of the NPOESS program into 2 separate agency programs, one DoD and one NOAA. Under this option, each agency would be responsible for acquisition of satellites in its own priority orbit, similar to how NOAA and Air Force currently operate them. The tri-agency partners are continuing to assess and outline possible implementation approaches for each of these options. The second area is satellite coverage and data continuity. In partnership with NASA and DoD, we've been considering ways to modify the constellation to address the risk of potential gaps. Possible adjustments here include modifying the undeveloped portions of the ground system and the one unbuilt sensor, reconsidering the structure of the primary spacecraft, and use of small satellites or commercial satellites to help to make the program more successful. Regarding budget, NOAA, DoD, and NASA are working to address the budget challenges facing the program. Continued development problems have consumed the program's resources and forced the programs to make difficult trade-offs. The program will likely require increased budget to meet the nation's need or have the program scope reduced to better align with available budget. Cost estimating is underway at this time. Regarding GAO recommendations, NOAA concurs with all of the recommendations and is implementing them. And in conclusion, I'd just like to state that it's widely acknowledged that satellites are very complicated and difficult systems to design, build, and operate. However, their capabilities play a key role in NOAA's mission to observe and predict the Earth's environment and provide critical information used to protecting life and property. Based on the steps NOAA has taken in partnership with NASA and DoD, the program's on an initial path to resolve some of its current challenges. However, it's clear additional work by the government is required to fully resolve these issues, and the program intends to continue to keep this committee apprised of its developments as we move forward. Thank you very much.
It sounds like there'll be 6 more oversight hearings on the NPOESS satellite system. I now recognize myself for five minutes of questioning. Mr. Powner, your report, as well as Mr. Young's testimony, attributed much of the failure to the inability of the 3 agencies, NOAA, DOD, NASA, the Tri-Agency Executive Committee, or XCOM, to function properly, for the different agencies simply to play well with others. Your recommendation that in the future they should develop their own satellites because they just couldn't get along seemed like an extraordinary step when there appear to be some significant savings or something that should be available if they both need satellite. They all need satellites flying to cooperate. We've got new players on the scene. We've got Dr. Lubchenco at NOAA, Dr. Carter at DOD, Mr. Scalisi, if that's pronounced correctly, at NASA in the XCOM positions. Do you have access to the report cards from elementary school? Do you know how well they play with others? Do you think there's any chance that XCOM can be made to work as intended with different people in the seats?
Well, I think clearly in the short term, the delivery of the 4 satellites as well as the demonstration satellite with NPOESS, we need to keep the current structure or go to something similar to what Mr. Young is suggesting with one agency lead. We're about ready to deliver on the demonstration satellite, hopefully, and then also with the first satellite C1. The recommendation long-term to split it, I think if you look historically, this was intended to save money. It hasn't saved money. We still haven't resolved the differing agency missions. I think after these 4 satellites are delivered, we ought to consider going back to separate satellite acquisitions. In the interim, our recommendations are geared towards getting the XCOM on board. They still have a management role here to deliver the satellites that are currently on the table.
Mr. Young, do you agree? Is there something that's just in the system of having these 3 agencies try to work together? Is it a personality issue? Is there any possibility now that we've got different people sitting in the seats at the XCOM meetings that we'll have better results? It'll be less dysfunctional.
I don't think it's a personality.
Okay.
I don't think it's a personality issue. I think it really boils down to a couple of factors. One is the priorities of the partners are different, and it's hard to have an integrated management team when the various partners have different priorities. But I will come back and say, as I mentioned in my testimony, I think even in the revised program that our T suggests, the XCOM has a role, but you almost kind of fundamental that the 3 parties be the people who have decision-making authority. Though, as was pointed out in the GAO report, the DOD representative is not the individual decision-making authority. So fundamentally, this is an organization that meets some weeks. Afterwards, there is some meeting, which I'm not totally familiar with, where the decision-making authority, the individual who has milestone and acquisition authority, makes decisions. So I think there are ways to make it more efficient, but it's hard to overcome the factor that the 3 organizations have, in our view, different priorities. And by the way, I want to come back and say it doesn't mean any of the priorities are wrong. I mean, it's just that they're different.
Mr. Young, your testimony embraced the idea that the White House should ultimately, they're all 3 executive branch agencies. Perhaps OSTP should come in and decide between the priorities. That seems like a kind of a big task for a small office. But am I correct? Is that what you think needs to happen? OSTP needs to come in and decide, adjudicate the disputes?
Yes, and let me add to that just a little bit. It again is our observation or judgment that the XCOM cannot cannot come to resolution on the issue for the reasons we've talked about. So then, as you said, it really has to go to another level. when we really got looking at this, that was kind of beyond where we had expected to go, to tell you the truth. But when we started looking at this particular program, it becomes very obvious this is a national program for all the reason that you folks that identified. It's not a program that should be a subject to compromise. It's a program that should be decided on what's in the best interest of the country. And the right place for that to be done is the White House. So in our view, the office of the president has to designate a decision maker, underline decision maker, not a committee chairman, not a coordinator, but a decision maker. And that decision maker has to listen to all of the inputs and decide, one, what's affordable, and two, what's in the best interest of the country. I think it can be done. We didn't identify who that should be. It certainly could be the director of the Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. It could be the director of NSC. But I think it's probably in those two organizations that you would find the right expertise to provide this leadership. But I again, if you'll excuse me, I want to underline, we don't need another committee chairman, and we don't need another coordinator. We need someone who's going to listen to all the facts and decide what's in the best interest of the country.
My time has now expired. Both cloakrooms have now told us that there will likely be votes shortly. We will try to go and make a decision about whether we will come back or not, depending on how far we've gone. And if I think all the members should know that if they remain members of this committee, they'll have many opportunities to ask questions at NPOESS oversight hearings. Dr. Brown, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Glackin, NOAA has recommended 4 different paths towards the resolution as we go forward in the NPOESS management. Do y'all have a preference of one over the other? Would you make that clear to us, please?
Yes, I will. From a NOAA, I'll speak from a NOAA perspective here. NOAA believes that we have the broadest mission requirements for this, for both weather and climate. And we also recognize that this is a critically important program to us. It's really germane to our mission. And NOAA would be prepared to take leadership in this program, I think, as we move forward with it. There's quite a few, I would hasten to say, there's quite a few issues associated with things that have to be worked out, and we're really in the midst of doing that. But Secretary Locke has been actively engaged in this program and committed to finding the right solution for the nation. And if it's going to be right for the nation, then I think he would be prepared.
Okay, would you rank those 4 options for us in terms of effectiveness, difficulty in implementing each option, and the likelihood of it being implemented?
All of the options have, I think, pros and cons to them that are still being evaluated at this point. I think the status quo does represent some significant challenges for us, as Mr. Young has highlighted for us today. Options 2 and 3, I think, have a significant pro to them in that there would be a very clear point for authority, accountability, and responsibility for a program there. To go to option 2 would obviously be a transition to get there. Option 3 would be easier. In option 4, which I described as a divergence, I'll take another minute to say that there really is still a lot of commonality in that site. We have a ground system today, and the committee may not be aware, but NOAA actually operates DoD's operational satellites for them today. So NOAA has a very strong role in operations of these satellites.
Mr. Young, would you please comment on those 4 options and any other option that you see of the 4, as well as rank them in order of effectiveness and implementation?
Yeah, let me give just a little bit of background. You're probably familiar, but our particular group, we had a fairly broad representation. It was 9 of us, but if there was any weighting, it was in the direction of people who had national security space experience. I really highlight that because it was a group that I think was genuinely looking for what's in the best interest of the country, not what's the best organizational solution. We debated a fair amount on that subject, and our conclusion is a little bit, as Ms. Glackin said, that NOAA is really the organization that the country looks to provide weather and climate leadership. And when you're assigning responsibility for something, I think you want to assign it to that organization where it's their number one priority, not their number 7 priority. And in that regard, it's number one priority to NOAA. And it was very obvious to us that NOAA was the organization. NOAA is not a space acquisition organization, so they need NASA to be a partner with them in order to be able to implement it.
So you basically agree with
I do.
Secretary Glackin. Ms. Powner, would you comment, please?
Well, I think in the near term, we have the existing structure to deal with, so that needs to go forward over the next several months. Hopefully, we'll have a quick decision if we go with the one agency. I agree that NOAA would be that agency because this is not a priority at DoD. The fourth option is clearly a longer-term approach after this constellation of NPOESS satellites would be launched.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in the sake of time, I'm going to yield back.
Thank you for that very generous decision. What I would propose that each of the remaining members, we haven't called a vote. You heard the bells or the horns. That each of the members ask one round of questions. If they can keep it below 5 minutes, maybe more like 3-ish, we can complete this 6th hearing on NPOESS and save our question for the 7th or 8th hearing. Ms. Dalkemper for 5 or less.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try to be brief. Mr. Powner, it seems that every time that you've come before this committee, your reporting cost increases in this program. Yet the entire Nunn-McCurdy process was supposed to stabilize the program. Why haven't we converged on a stable cost estimate for the program before this? And can you give me a firm number now?
Well, I think if you look at the history of this program, the current overrun is primarily due to the technical problems that the program is faced with the VIR sensor. I think there were unforeseen technical problems. You can argue that maybe those technical problems should have anticipated those. So in the past, we can go back to, and there's been mismanagement across the board on this. We're faulting XCOM right now. Historically, you can go back, there was prime contractor not overseeing subs. There were problems with program office, so there's been mismanagement throughout. Not a single organization that we can point to say that's the one organization. It's been from contractors, through program office, through PEOs, through XCOM. Everyone's at fault. I think if you look going forward, the estimate right now of $3.9 billion, it's going to at least grow another $1 billion, but likely more because there also will be integration issues which typically occur on both NPP and that first satellite. So I would expect at a minimum it'll be $1 billion, but likely more. So that'll place us in the $15 billion life cycle cost range.
So I'm sorry, what was the total?
$15 billion.
And can you say that that's a stable number?
No, it'll be higher than that.
So there's still no firm number.
And I think the program would agree with that too. That's why they want to have these detailed cost estimates that they're going to work on. There's 5 estimates that are currently in the works right now. We haven't seen those. Those have not been disclosed to us. It's going to at least be 15.
Mr. Young and Ms. Glackin, would you please comment on my question?
I really can't add to the cost numbers. When in our report, the thing we were really trying, we said greater than $1 billion. What we were really trying to do is make sure everybody understood this wasn't a fixer-up problem. I mean, it was a problem of a significant magnitude. I don't know what the upper cap, is on that particular number, but it's in excess of $1 billion.
Ms. Glackin?
I agree with that.
Well, it certainly would be nice to have a stable number that we know we can.
No question.
I'm new to Congress, but so I haven't been here for all these other hearings, and I guess I'll be here for quite a few after this. But what's that? I hope, yeah, I hope I am. But I mean, I hope I'm not. I hope that we can put this problem behind us. Just as a concerned citizen who came into Congress, these are the kind of things that, just make people back home shake their heads and wonder what we're doing down here. So
I probably should, but if I could add to that, I agree. My personal belief is it's not necessary to have a 7th hearing.
we should be able to do this if we get a decision maker in.
The right leadership and the right corrective actions can prevent a 7th hearing.
Thank you very much. I will yield back.
The record should note that most of these hearings do predate Ms. Dalkemper's service in Congress. Mr. Bilbray for 5 minutes or such lesser time as he may consume.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just editorial note. It's nice to hear about a problem that's only $1 billion.
No, it's more than
that was
that.
with a B, not with a T, right? Okay. Are we talking are we talking the biggest problem is incompatibility of hardware between the three different choices? Is it a debate over the hardware itself?
I don't think so. I think it really, if I could kind of, again, hit the point I'll try to make my testimony, the DoD Air Force states that they are satisfied with legacy, meaning current weather satellite data. They're satisfied with that capability,
Who is?
the DoD and the Air Force.
Okay.
And they're not willing to provide funding to provide capability beyond that. Now, it's been kind of directed that the two organizations fund 50-50. Now, NOAA, and Ms. Glackin can say this much better than I, but NOAA states that today they use all of their weather satellites, including theirs and DoD's, but they also use some very special capability from NASA R&D satellites that are operating well beyond their design lifetime. And it's the combination of those data that gives us the quality of weather forecasting we have today. To go to legacy capability only would be a significant step back in the country's ability to do weather forecasting. That difference in opinion is big. And when we would sit in the meetings with the two organizations, good people on both sides, but you could just sense the edge that created because each was trying to be supportive of their respective organizations' priorities. Not surprising. Given that large difference, and it is large difference in priorities, makes any kind of an integrated implementation of this program, I guess I should say difficult, but I probably should use even a stronger statement than that.
Well, let me say, someone who's been in government for over 30 years, I mean, any bureaucracy that's satisfied obviously doesn't know what it doesn't know. I mean, I think that seriously we need to talk about that. And this whole infighting kind of reminds me of trying to get 18 police agencies to agree on one communication system.
Probably right.
And everybody's got their angle to it, and I understand the infighting here. My biggest concern is people thinking they don't have a vested interest in the other guy's agenda. I don't think that there are very many people in business who thought the military doing internet was going to be a big deal to them. And frankly, I think there's a whole lot of technology exchange. I don't think any of us know in the long run the benefits that may happen through cooperation. And so, Mr. Chairman, I just think that we've got to approach this not just of the issue of what is the forecasting that the three agencies want to look at, or the data they want to acquire, or the program they want, but the fact of understanding that there are things out there that we're going to get a benefit and get problems in that we don't know about, and to approach that. I mean, how many people in business really saw the Eisenhower Act, which originally was designed for the military, that really was the boon for interstate commerce? So I just hope that we approach this with the attitude that there's a lot more at stake than just forecasting the weather we know now. And it just boggles my mind to think that maybe the institutions that think they have enough data really aren't aware of just how broad horizons are. I guess it goes back to the old thing that turn of the century when they said we might as well shut down the patents office because everything that's ever been invented has already been invented. So I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. LeBray. Mr. Davis has made our life slightly easier by going to vote and foregoing his round of questions. Without making this another round of questions, we do have just a minute or two more. Mr. Young said he did not think we needed a 7th hearing or an 8th or a 9th or a 10th hearing, that there were things that we could do to avoid that necessity, that need. Could each of you give one sentence that you think is the most important thing to be done to avoid the need for 7th, 8th, 9th hearing and further delays and further cost overruns and further everything that's gone wrong? Mr. Powner.
Yeah, there's an XCOM meeting June 26th. We need a firm decision on program direction, which includes scope and cost. And if we don't have that decision, I think we do need a hearing.
Does someone need to call the Secretary of Defense and suggest someone show up? Mr. Young.
The White House needs to establish the program that's in the best interest of the country, and then we need to budget for it at the most probable cost, which is an 80-20 confidence with sufficient amount of contingency.
Ms. Glackin.
I think that we need to make adjustments to the program with respect to management to have the management oversight be more effective, and we need to develop realistic cost and schedules for this program that we can live within.
All right. Any valedictory comments from Dr. Brown?
I just want to thank Mr. Powner and Mr. Young for their hard work on this. Hopefully we won't need another hearing. Hopefully we'll get good management in place and we start flying birds and get the data that Ms. Glackin and her agency needs, and that this will be a soft problem. And I just want to thank you all very much. I have tremendous respect for Mr. Young. I knew him years ago when I was the physician for the Martin Marietta plant in Americus, Georgia, and so I've known him for number of years, and I just have tremendous confidence in what he recommends. And I thank both of you gentlemen, and I thank you, Madam Secretary, for coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, now we need to sprint to the floor, but thank you again. We will bring this hearing to a close. Thank all the witnesses for testifying. And the Rules Committee, the record will remain open for 2 weeks for additional statements from the members and for answers to any follow-up questions the committee may have for the witnesses. The witnesses are excused. The hearing is now adjourned.